It was a Tuesday evening in October, the kind that smelled like wood smoke and brittle leaves. I was in my usual corner of the Jefferson County Library, grading a stack of Romeo and Juliet essays. Teaching had been my anchor since returning home to Maplewood, Virginia. 3 months earlier, I had left my job in Philadelphia and driven back because of my mother's cancer diagnosis. Jefferson High hired me quickly. My old AP literature teacher was now the principal, and soon I fell into a routine. 5 classes a day, tutoring after school, helping with my mother's treatments, dinners with my father, and Tuesday nights here at the library, where I could be invisible away from the pitying eyes of a small town that remembered everything. I was sliding the last essay into my bag when I felt a small tug on my jacket. Looking down, I saw a boy no more than 6, his dark hair sticking up in the back like a duckling's tail. But it wasn't his hair that made my breath catch. It was his eyes, green bright and achingly familiar. I had seen those eyes before years ago in the face of someone I had loved and buried. The boy held up my red grading pen. "Mom, you dropped this," he said. My smile came automatically, the one I reserved for nervous students. "I'm not your mom, sweetheart." His brow furrowed. He tilted his head, studying my face with unnerving seriousness. "But I saw your picture," he insisted, "in Dad's wallet. He looks at it sometimes when he thinks I'm sleeping." I forced my voice steady. "Who's your dad?" The boy answered clearly, as if delivering a school recitation, "Silas Brener." "He's over there by the magazines." And with those words, the world split down the middle. Because Silas Brener had died 5 years ago. I was there when they pulled the sheet over his face after the car accident. I stood at his funeral, choking through Shakespeare's words, and threw the first handful of dirt onto his casket. I spent years in therapy trying to live with the sound of earth hitting wood. Yet when I turned toward the magazine rack, there he was. Older, yes, with a beard he'd never worn when we were together, flipping through a copy of Car and Driver, a magazine he'd never cared for back then. But it was him, Silas, unmistakably, impossibly alive. The boy Jasper, I would later learn, ran back to him. Silas reached down, ruffling his son's hair, utterly ordinary, in a gesture of fatherhood that made my stomach twist. A woman appeared then, blonde and effortlessly pretty, balancing a baby on her hip. She leaned down to kiss Silas, her wedding ring glinting under the library's fluorescent lights. And just like that, I was watching a family. His family. The man I had mourned, the man whose absence had carved a crater into my life, had built a new world without me. I sat there holding a stack of essays about doomed love, unable to move, watching a ghost live an entirely new existence. And I realized something: when the dead come back, they never come back alone. They return with wives, children, and whole lives stitched together from the tatters of the one they abandoned. And then you face the question, do you let the ghost keep walking? Or do you call out his name and see what happens when the past and present collide? That night, I drove home in silence, every nerve still buzzing. My rented apartment above the bakery smelled of cinnamon and sugar, but it only suffocated me. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone staring at the license plate I'd memorized when I watched them leave the library. BWK4782 Virginia tags. Just ordinary letters and numbers, yet they represented the impossible. Within minutes, I pulled up the DMV records. The minivan was registered to Silas J. Brener at 447 Maple Street, right here in Maplewood. My dead ex-boyfriend had been renewing his registration for 3 straight years. Facebook searches led me to his wife, Bryn. Her profile was open, filled with wedding photos, baby announcements, Christmas mornings, vacations, birthdays. All dated after his supposed death. Every smiling picture mocked me, documenting the life he'd built while I'd been stumbling through grief. It was almost midnight when I called my sister Delaney in Boston. She was the only one who could understand without pitying me. "Silas is alive," I said, my voice raw. At first, she thought I'd been drinking, but then I sent her the records, the photos, the proof. "Holy, how is this possible?" she whispered. We stayed on the phone for hours, piecing together what I'd seen. The pieces didn't fit yet, the picture was undeniable. Silas hadn't died. He had faked his death. The next morning, I sat in my car outside Piedmont Development Group, the company listed on his LinkedIn profile. At 8:15 a.m., I saw him. He walked into the office in a fleece jacket, coffee in hand, the same slight limp from an old football injury still in his step. I lifted my phone and snapped photos, my hands trembling. He was real. Not a ghost, not a twin, not a hallucination. My dead ex-boyfriend was alive, working a steady job 6 blocks from the high school where I taught his son's future classmates. For the next 3 days, I lived in a daze, grading papers by day and scrolling through Bryn's open Facebook profile by night. I saw at all: the country club wedding 3 years earlier, the pregnancy announcement for Jasper. 6 years ago, the newborn photos of baby Winona. He had started this new life, even before his supposed death, slipping into it seamlessly while I was left clutching ashes and memories. Every post was like a knife, each smile proof that he had moved on while I had been drowning. Delaney called me, constantly worried about what I might do. She wanted me to go to the police, but I couldn't, not yet. I needed to understand why. Why he would abandon me, why he would fake his death, why his family would help cover it up. We hired a private investigator, and within days the puzzle started to take shape. There were debts, gambling debts, ones he couldn't pay. Threats had been made. People had followed him, shown him photos of me walking alone after class. He had been desperate. His brother Jake was a cop, and he had apparently helped orchestrate the fake accident. A body too damaged to view a closed casket, a cousin who offered him a new job. It sounded like a bad thriller novel, except it had stolen 5 years of my life. When the report confirmed everything I knew, I couldn't stay in the shadows anymore. I needed to see him. I needed to hear it from his mouth. So one afternoon, I drove to his office and waited. At noon, when he walked out toward his car scrolling his phone, I stepped directly into his path. The phone clattered to the asphalt, his face draining of color until he looked more ghost than man. "Marlo," he whispered, strangled. For a heartbeat, we stood there in silence, the October sun sharp against us, two people who had once believed forever was a promise. I gestured toward my car. He followed, and soon we were sitting in the Honda, where we had shared our first kiss 15 years earlier. I could hardly breathe. My hands gripped the steering wheel like I needed an anchor. How was all I managed? And then it spilled from him, like he had been waiting years for someone to ask. He told me about the poker games, how it had started as nothing serious, just cards with friends, until he owed $40,000 to men who didn't forgive. He told me how they showed him pictures of me, threatened to make me disappear slowly. How Jake had come up with the plan, switching the body of a stranger for his own, convincing everyone it was him. Mitchell, his cousin, had given him the job at Piedmont, a new start. I had no choice, he said, his voice breaking. But then came the part that cut deeper than any lie. He admitted he had already been with Bryn before his death. Not serious, he claimed, just something to forget me. But when she got pregnant, he couldn't leave. He couldn't abandon her the way he had abandoned me. So he built a life with her, a family, while I was left clinging to a headstone. "You kept my photo," I said, "because Jasper had told me." Silas nodded, shame flickering in his eyes. "I couldn't let go completely. It was from your first day teaching. You were so proud." I looked at it sometimes, even when I shouldn't have. The words hit me like a cruel joke. Even his lies had left me tethered to him. I thought of Jasper then, of his sweet face and those green eyes. What if he ends up in my class someday, I asked. Silas swallowed hard. Then I'll pray you're as good at keeping secrets as I am. I stared at him, searching for the boy I had loved. He was still there, buried beneath the beard and the glasses and the lies. But he was also gone, replaced by someone who could live with this level of deception, who could tuck his children into bed at night while leaving me to grieve a ghost. That evening, I drove home numb, replaying every detail until my head throbbed. I could expose him. I could burn his new life to the ground. Or I could walk away, leaving the secret buried. Neither choice felt like justice. Neither felt like healing. And yet, I knew one thing for certain: nothing in Maplewood would ever be the same again. The days that followed were heavy with silence. I still taught my classes, still graded essays, still carried my mother to chemo on Wednesdays, but inside me was a storm I couldn't name. Every moment at Jefferson High felt different, sharper. When students laughed in the halls, when colleagues asked about my mother, when I caught a glimpse of the football field where Silas and I had shared our first kiss, it all felt like glass, fragile, dangerous, about to shatter. I met him again a week later in my empty classroom after school. The October sun slanted through the windows, casting golden light on the desks, where teenagers had scrawled their initials and secrets. Silas stood by my desk, looking at the Shakespeare quotes pinned to the walls, the same words I used to read to him in bed on lazy Sunday mornings. He looked older, weighed down, but when his eyes met mine, I saw the flicker of the boy I once loved. I handed him the photo Jasper had seen, the one from my first day teaching. "Your son deserves a father who doesn't live in the past," I said softly. His face crumpled, and for the first time since his reappearance, he truly broke. Tears streamed down his cheeks, the kind of raw crying that changes the shape of a face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For everything. For choosing the coward's way. For leaving you to grieve a death that never happened." I wanted to scream, to rage, to hit him. Instead, I said, "You chose to protect me. I can't hate you for that. But I can't forgive you either. We both died 5 years ago, Silas. The difference is, I came back to life." I told him about the job offer in Seattle, about the private school that wanted me to teach advanced literature. I had accepted it that morning. When my mother's treatments ended and the semester closed, I would leave Maplewood. "What about Bryn?" I asked. "Will you ever tell her?" He shook his head, his face twisted with guilt. "How can I?" "Hey, honey, I faked my death to escape the mob, and you've been married to a ghost for 3 years. She doesn't deserve that truth." "You're right," I said. "She deserves better. She deserves to know who she's building her life with. But that's your choice, not mine." We stood in silence, surrounded by the essays of 16-year-olds who believed love was tragic and grand. For us, love had been both. It had been the spark that lit our youth and the fire that burned down our future. At the door, he turned to me one last time. "Promise me something. If Jasper ever ends up in your class, if our paths cross again, be kind to him. He's a good kid." My voice was steady when I answered. "I'm always kind to my students, even the ones whose fathers are supposed to be dead." That night, I poured a glass of wine I didn't drink, staring out at Main Street. The bakery below filled the air with cinnamon and sugar, as though the town itself were trying to smother me in sweetness. But I couldn't taste any of it. My heart felt like it had been hollowed out, and yet in the emptiness, there was also clarity. I had loved Silas once with everything I had, but the man I buried was gone, and the one who remained was a stranger. My future didn't live in Maplewood anymore. It lived somewhere else, waiting for me to claim it. 2 months later, after moving into my apartment in Seattle with its wide windows and view of the Sound, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was $50,000 in cash and a note scrawled in handwriting I knew better than my own. What I owed them with interest. Start your new life free. Teach those kids to make better choices than I did. It was signed, Simply S. I sat with the money spread across my kitchen table for hours, trying to decide what to do. In the end, I donated half to a women's shelter in Maplewood and used the other half to create a scholarship for future teachers. I named it after my grandmother, not him. He didn't deserve that kind of immortality. Life in Seattle slowly became my own again. The rain, the gray skies, the smell of salt off the water, they washed me clean in ways Maplewood never could. My new students were sharp, skeptical, eager to debate. When they groaned over Romeo and Juliet declaring the ending unrealistic, I told them they were right to be doubtful. Love doesn't usually kill us in 2 days. Sometimes it does something worse. It forces us to live with choices that cut deeper than death. I taught differently now. I wove in the truth I had learned the hardest way. Love isn't just balcony scenes and poetry. It's debts, lies, sacrifices, and the weight of silence. When a girl said Juliet should have gone to college instead of faking her death, I smiled. When a boy argued Romeo needed therapy more than a girlfriend, I nodded. They were braver than I had been at their age, less willing to worship tragedy. Every so often, late at night, I searched Bryn's Facebook page. I never sent a friend request, never crossed that invisible line, but I looked. Jasper starting first grade, smiling with missing teeth, running on a soccer field. Winona toddling behind him, her little hands outstretched for balance. They looked happy, whole, safe. A family untouched by ghosts. It twisted something in me, but also steadied me. Their lives didn't need my intrusion. Their joy didn't deserve my destruction. Silas was right about one thing: some secrets are worth keeping. Not to protect the liar, but to protect the innocent people standing in the blast radius. I could have destroyed him with a single phone call, exposing everything, shattering the family he had built on lies. But what would that have given me? Not my 20s back. Not the wedding we never had. Not the children we never made. Only more wreckage in a world already littered with brokenness. The package of money sat heavy in my memory. His note, too. I kept it folded in a drawer, though I didn't need to read it anymore. It was proof of what had once been, of what I had lost, of what he had chosen. But it was also proof that I had survived. He wanted me to start a new life free. And finally, I was. There were moments when the grief resurfaced, walking past couples holding hands in Pike Place Market, or hearing my students laugh about young love as though it were a harmless experiment. But grief no longer owned me. It was no longer the air I breathed. It had become something smaller, manageable, like an old scar you notice only when the light hits it a certain way. Sometimes I still think about that October evening in the library, the fluorescent lights, the small hand tugging at my jacket, the 6 words that shattered 5 years of silence. But I saw your picture. I thought I was just grading essays that night. Instead, I was handed a key to a truth I wasn't ready for. And maybe that was the gift. Because sometimes the dead don't haunt us to torment us. They come back to show us we're strong enough to let go. If anyone asks me now whether I believe in ghosts, I say yes, but not in the way they expect. I believe in the ghosts of who we used to be, the ones we carry inside us until we're brave enough to set them down. Silas will always be one of mine. Not the ghost of a lover who died, but the ghost of a life I thought I'd have. And I've learned that just because something haunts you doesn't mean you have to let it stay. So here's the truth I leave with you, love. Can rewrite your world in a heartbeat, and loss can leave you hollow. But healing is choosing not to chase the ghost, choosing to live again, even when forever has been broken. The bravest thing you can do is let go. If you found meaning in this story, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. And let me know in the comments about a time you had to choose between truth and protecting someone you cared about. Your story might be the light someone else needs,